Hi everybody, it's Rich. What we're going to do right now for starters is, now that we've built a table in our MySQL database to hold our users, we need to build a simple registration form, basic HTML form. We'll add a little bootstrap at the top for styling, and then we'll build a page that will save our users, pretty much similar to the Save Movie and Save Books pages that we've done. The only difference is we're going to have to add our hashing to make sure when we save new users, rather than saving their password in plain text, we're going to want to save those passwords as 128 character hashed strings. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start by taking my files from last week. So I'm just going to go into my week 5 folder. I'm going to grab my movies pages because we're going to want those for later. I'm just going to copy those into my week 6 folder. Then I'm going to fire up my code editor. I'm going to fire up my Microsoft Expression Web. And I'm going to make a new PHP page, which I will immediately just give a title of register. And right away, I'll save this file into my week 6 folder. And I'm going to save it with the name register.php. So this will be our sign up page so we can create some user accounts. Remember, the whole goal is that these movies pages we have here, right now they're public. We want to make them private. In order to make them private, first we have to register users, and then we're going to have to build a login page before we can add a security check onto these pages. So I'm going to save my page. And the very first thing I'm going to do is I want to add Twitter Bootstrap so we can use these styles. So where can I get them? Well, just going to close out that template. What I've done on Blackboard is I've actually put the Twitter Bootstrap links on Blackboard for you. So if you go into the weekly learning folder, under tools and resources, if you scroll down, right here's the code for the two that links to the two Bootstrap CSS files as well as the Bootstrap JavaScript file. So I'm just going to copy those to my clipboard. And inside the heading, I'll just paste those in. So now we've got Bootstrap available. So we're going to build out a simple form. I'm going to wrap the whole thing in a div, which I think last week I used div. Probably I should use better semantic HTML. I'm going to use the main tag, and I'll say class equals container. That'll give it a little bit of padding on the left. So all of the content on our page will live inside of here. We'll put on a heading tag. And then we're going to build a simple registration form. We basically need 3 fields. We need a username. Actually, we're going to ask for email, which we will use as a username. Then we'll have 2 password fields, a password and a confirm password field. And then at the bottom, we're going to have a submit button. So I'm going to create a form, and as usual we'll use our method of post because it's more secure than using get. And our action, the page that will process the user registration, we'll just call it save-registration.php. So that'll be the page we build next. So then in our form, we're going to put on a field set. We'll give it a class from Bootstrap, a form group. That'll add some padding around our form groups, around our field sets. And inside here, I'm going to add a label for our email text box that we'll add. And I'll give this a class, as we did last week, of 2 small columns wide. If we jump quickly into our design view, we can see so far this is what our page looks like. We have a title of user registration, an email label. Now we're going to want a text box. So we'll add an input. I'll give it a name of, actually we called our field a username in the database, so I think I'll call it username. I'm still going to make my label say email so people know to enter an email address. That's what we're going to use as their username. We're going to add the HTML5 required attribute. And we're also going to add the HTML5 attribute type equals email. So this way, if the user is using an HTML5 enabled browser, it won't allow them to submit the form unless they have a properly formatted email address in this box. So that's our first field set. I'll take out that star. We'll add a second field set, and now we'll add a label and then a text box for the password. So we'll give it our same Bootstrap class. So the labels are the same width and everything will align nicely. So we'll add a second input. We'll call this one password. We'll say that it's required. And we'll set the type as password. So this means the characters will get obscured, will get hidden by circles or asterisks depending on our browser as the user types. We'll add a third and final field set. Oops. Forgot my class equals form group on my second field set, so I'll just add that back in. And I misspelled field set. We'll fix it up. So my tags are correct. So inside our third field set, we'll add a third label. So I'll call this text box confirm. We'll make it required. And we'll set the type as password as well. So once again, the character will be hidden as the user types in case someone's peeking over their shoulder. The last thing we want is a button that is a submit button, so it'll post our form to the server. And we'll give it a class of call sm offset 2. So that way it'll start in the third column of Bootstrap's invisible grid. So the left side of the button will be neatly aligned with the left side of our three text boxes. And the other thing I want to do is style the button. So after we position it with the column offsetting, we'll say that it's a button. And by using the btn-success class, that'll give it a green background and white font. So there's our registration page. This should be all we need to do. We don't need any PHP code. So I'm just going to save that form. Scroll up for a minute so you can see from the top we've given it a title of register. We've added the links to Bootstrap. We've created a main section with the heading, our form that contains our three text boxes. First one of type email, the second two of type password, and finally our submit button. So I'm going to save this and I'm going to upload it to the web server. I'll have to create a week 6 folder on the server and then we can check it out in our browser. So I'm going to connect to DreamHost and I'll go into my local COMP1006 week 6 folder. And on the server, I don't have a week 6 folder yet, so I'm going to create this one by right-clicking and choosing Create Directory. Now I'll go inside of it, and for now I'm just going to upload my register page. So there it is. So now if I grab this part of my URL, I should be able to go here and load my register page. Let's try it out. I'll create a new tab, paste that in, and now if I click register, here's our form. If we want to check our HTML5 validation, notice if I submit a blank form, HTML5 catches that these fields are empty. And notice by adding type equals password in the two password boxes, the characters are invisible to us as we type. Now, HTML5 still doesn't like this plain text input because it's asking me to enter text that looks like a proper email. But now it's happy, and if I click submit, we're going to get a 404 not found error, which is okay. It's looking for save registration. We haven't built that yet, but we're going to start building. So save and upload your form. It should look like my form, and when you click the submit button with a valid email address, you should get that 404 not found error. If you're getting anything different, then I want you to pause, rewind the video at this point, go back and review the code, and then catch back up at this point once your form is working. Okay, so now that we have our registration page online, we're going to need to build the save registration page that will perform some server-side validation in case our HTML5 validators don't work, and then we're going to want to hash the password and save the new user to our database. So I'm going to go return to my code editor. I'm going to create a second PHP file. And I'm going to save this one as save registration.php. Now this will largely be an invisible page. What we really want to do is save the user, and then we're going to take them off to a login page, which we will build next. We'll leave that redirection for a little bit later. So we're going to throw on some PHP tags. 90% of what we want to do on this page, we've already done several times before. So we'll put our comments on here first. We'll walk through the steps and then we'll code it. And again, you can pause the video at any point. I want you to follow along and be coding your page. So the first thing we're going to do is store the user inputs in variables. We'll want to validate the inputs. We'll proceed if the inputs are complete. And if they are complete, what are we going to do? Well, we will hash the password so it's not stored in plain text. The database. We'll connect to the database. We'll set up the SQL insert command. We'll populate the insert with parameter values. We'll execute the insert. And lastly, we'll disconnect. So these are all the things we're going to do. Really, the only thing that's new here is this step. Everything else we've already done on our movies page, and if you've been following along with the labs, you've done these as well on your books pages. So we have three inputs on our form. We've called them username, password, and confirm. We want to make sure that we have values for all of them, and we also are going to want to check that our two password values are the same. So I'm going to create three variables that match those inputs. So we'll use the post array to capture the username, the password, and the confirm password value. We're also going to create one more variable as we did back in week 4 when we were dealing with input validation. I'm just going to call it OK. We'll set it to true, meaning if our OK variable is still true when we're done checking everything, then we know we can go ahead and save the user. If we encounter any problems, we'll change that value from true to false. We'll spit out an error message and we'll stop the process. So just like we did back in week 4, we'll want to check if our username variable is empty. Now I think in week 4, when we looked at the code, I wrote it out this way. Because empty returns true or false, this part of the function, we can write our code this way, but this part is really redundant. So to simplify the code, I'm just going to take out this part in green. These are equivalent. So this evaluates to if our username is empty, that condition evaluates to true. We want to print a message that says, we're going to call it email for the users, so they know it has to be an email address. And I'll put in a line break. And now we want to toggle our OK variable. Our form is incomplete, so we're not going to want to save the user. We're also going to check if our password is empty. And if it is, we'll do the same thing. We'll say password is required. And again, OK is false. Now, lastly, we need to make sure that if password, here's our not equals operator. If password is not the same as confirm, then we're going to want to tell the user that their passwords don't match. And again, OK is false. So these are our 3 validation rules. We don't really need to check if confirm is empty, because so long as if password is empty, we're going to get this message. So the user's already going to be told. There's no way they can get through unless they've put in a valid matching value for both password and confirm. So now we want to evaluate our OK variable. If we've encountered any errors, OK will be false. If we haven't encountered errors, OK will still be true. And again, we can evaluate it the same way. We don't need to say equals equals true in our condition because it's a Boolean value. If we just say if OK, the equals equals true is implied. So if it's OK, I'm going to open a curly brace. I'm going to indent all of these comments because all of these things will happen only if OK is true. So now here's the one new part we're going to need. We have our plain text password. We're going to want to convert that into a hashed value that will be 128 characters long. So if our database is compromised, those passwords won't be visible in plain text. So I'm going to create a new variable called hashed password. And we're going to use the PHP function called hash. Now you can read about the hash function on the php.net website, the official documentation. So the hash function asks us for minimum 2 parameters. What hashing algorithm do we want to use? The current standard and the strongest one is called SHA 512. Okay? This algorithm is what generates the 128 character password that we want to store. And now what is the value we want to hash? We want to hash our plain text password. So now when we insert our username and password into the database, instead of the plain text password, we are going to save to our database our hashed password. Now we'll do our database connection. We'll create a connection variable as we've been doing each week. Our host is sql.computerstudies. I'll put in my database name, you'll put in yours, and your database username, which is the same, and you'll put in your password into your connection string. Our SQL insert command, we're going to insert 2 values. Our table has 3 columns. We have a user ID, we have a username, and we have a password. We don't need to save the password twice, so the confirm is only for checking that the user correctly entered their password and didn't mistype it. So we're going to insert into the username and password field. We don't need to insert into the user ID field. That field is an auto-incrementing field. The MySQL database will automatically assign a user ID number. And now we want 2 parameters, one for username and one for password. Now we're going to need to fill our username and password parameters with our username variable and our hashed password variable. So I'm going to create a new command object. And we'll add our two parameters. So first we have our username, which is populated with our username variable. And the data type is a 50-character string. Then we'll fill our password variable. Now remember, we don't want to use this $sign password variable. That holds the plain text version of the password, what the user actually typed. What we want to save is our hashed password value. So this is our 128 character hashed string. So this is going to be a string, and we need to make sure it's 128 characters. Otherwise, we will have cut off or truncated some of those characters. We want to save all of them. Lastly, we'll just execute the command. We'll simply disconnect. Now, we won't add our redirection on quite yet. At this point, we can simply print out a message that says our user is saved. So I'm going to save my file. I'm going to upload it to the web server, and then I'm going to try to create a user account. So I've uploaded my save page. I'm going to go back to my browser, and I'm going to try filling this out. So I'm going to create a user, the email address test@test.com, and I'm going to create them with the password test. I suggest you might want to use this same combination of email and password, just so that we're going to be using this through the rest of the class, and potentially, we'll need this login through the rest of the course. It'd be good to create a simple login that you won't have any trouble remembering. So now when I click submit, I get a message saying user saved. I didn't get any errors. That's great. So I better check in my SQL database whether my account's actually there. So I'm going to go to my users table. We notice my password is 128 characters. Now I have a few users already, but you'll notice here is my user with test@test.com, and you can see what the password looks like. So it gets hashed. It's not readable, but all of those passwords will be exactly 128 characters long. So my page is working. So what I want you to do is if you're having trouble, once your account is created, you're able to create a user account, make a note of the credentials, because as I said, we're going to be needing them. So make sure that user account is successfully created in your database. If you've done that, then as soon as the video ends, you can mark this activity as complete, and we'll move on to your next activity, which is creating a login. If you're having any trouble, then I suggest rewinding, watching any part of the video again, and making sure that you have your save registration page working, because we're not going to be able to get the login working until you've been able to successfully create a user account.